My name is Jill Coyle, and from years of experience as a divorce attorney, I know for a fact that no one dies from divorce. The experts and I are here to show you how to not only survive, but thrive during the most difficult times. Welcome to another episode of No One Dies from Divorce. I'm so excited for my guest today, Grace Casper. Welcome from all the way from Waco, Texas.
Whoop, whoop, not so far.
I'm so excited. We're going to be talking about notes from a child of divorce, which, as you know, we as parents or divorce attorneys, or we get a lot of perspective from where we're sitting, but it's so much pertinent to be able to sit and get the perspective of where a child has sat in divorce. And so I'm really excited to talk about this. So Grace, thanks for joining and being willing to share your story.
Oh, absolutely, Jill. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, let me introduce you so that everybody kind of knows who you are. So Grace
Sure.
Casper became a child of divorce at age 8. By age 10, she had already written her first manuscript drafted for her book. Ever since then, she wanted to help families through the process of divorce. She is now 24 years old and runs divorce tips from kids. This includes posting on social media, sending out emails to parents, and hosting her podcast, Divorce: What I Wish My Parents Knew. The first podcast created from the child's perspective. I absolutely love that. The first draft from 10 years old is now being published into a book and parents called Dear Parents, Notes from a Child of Divorce, coming out in June, this June. That's
Yes,
so
ma'am.
exciting.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And when she isn't creating content about divorce, she works as a full-time elementary school librarian. She lives in Waco, Texas with her tiny Maltipoo, Teddy, and 2 of her best friends.
Yeah, that's correct. It
That's
sounds good.
amazing. Well,
When you
I'm
say it
really
like that,
glad.
I sound like really cool.
No, it's such a great your accomplishments, and you graduated from Baylor when? A couple of years ago?
In 2021, yep. So I graduated in the thick of COVID, but
COVID.
luckily
Ugh,
I got to walk on graduation, which was huge. So, yeah.
that's amazing. Well, that's a really great accomplishment, great school, and what you're doing, like I said, is really, really important to the work that we are doing.
hmm
So So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story. About we just said, your parents divorced when you were 8, but tell us a little bit more about that and your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my dad was actually married before my mom. So, I have two older half siblings who one of them, my older sister, she didn't grow up with me. But my older brother, he grew up with me until he graduated college. So, that was when I was in first grade. So, my older siblings, like, it's weird because we're half siblings and we are siblings, but yet because we have that distance with my sister growing up in Arizona and then me growing up in Colorado, I'd only see my sister like once a year.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I haven't become really good friends and like true, um, I don't know, companions with my older siblings until college. Because now
Mm-hmm.
we can talk to each other as adults and talk about real stuff going on. But it was interesting growing up because I felt like it was just me and my younger brother, Jack, who he is 21 now, so we're 2.5 years apart. But Jack and I are the ones who experienced like my parents' divorce because we're the only ones who share the same two parents.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up was kind of tumultuous. My mom, she was just always saying yes to my dad, and my mom created this thing for my brother and I, which this is going to sound kind of sad, but I promise it's not that sad. But it was this little closet that was like a walk-in closet, and we had a DVD player in there and junk food and blankets, and we called it the honeycomb hideout. And whenever mom and dad were fighting, we would hide in there.
Mm-hmm.
So Jack and I just really bonded, kind of through trauma.
Yeah.
He's my bud. But yeah, and so then when my mom sat Jack and I down, my dad wasn't there for the conversation. She sat us down. I was 8 years old, and she said, "Dad and I are getting a divorce." And Jack said, "Isn't that sad?" And she said, "Yeah, it is sad. It means that like me and your dad are not going to live together anymore, and we're not going to be married anymore." And I remember thinking like I'm supposed to be crying right now, but I didn't because I was so young, and I was like this is sad, but I don't really get it. And I couldn't comprehend everything.
Yeah.
So once we started going back and forth from mom and dad's house, then the reality of like what this really was started to set in. And then my grief started and my crying started and my physical like appearances of grief started to show up. So that's one thing that I will say to parents is like, if you do the talk with your kids and they don't react a certain way or like, wow, they don't seem upset at all, they probably just don't understand what's going on because they're
Right.
kids. But yeah, so then fast forward in fifth grade, I had a grand mal seizure the night before Thanksgiving, which is super random. And it caused me to have immense anxiety about falling asleep. And so my mom took me to a therapist, mainly surrounding my anxiety around seizures. But then what my therapist found was like, oh, shoot, this girl has a lot of uncovered anxiety about her parents' divorce. And she's using the facade of seizures to like cover it up. And
Mm-hmm.
so deep down, I had all of this stuff I wanted to share as a 10-year-old about my parents' divorce. So I worked with this counselor for around 6 years, off and on. And it was in fifth grade when she taught me the power of journaling. So I started writing a lot. And that is when I wrote what I said in my bio, which was the manuscript, which now exists today for the book that is getting published in June.
Right.
So, yeah, I wrote 10 tips for my brother and I from going back and forth from house to house. And those 10 tips I wrote in fifth grade have now ebbed and flowed into 23/24-year-old me writing to the parents saying, this is what I wanted for my brother and I. And here's ways that you can support your children through divorce from a child's perspective. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's amazing. I can imagine. I mean, we always talk about the perspective. Like I said, I'm a divorce attorney, so I've researched it a lot, but like there's also different ways that different ages are going to react
Yes,
to a divorce.
totally.
Um, what do you feel like as being a 10-year-old, like do you feel like it was like it would have been harder if you were older, if you were younger? Do you think that it was maybe a really hard time being 10? What's your thoughts on that?
So through my own research of interviewing other children of divorce, it's always going to be hard, but I feel as if the older you get, the harder it's going to be because the more memories you make as a family, the more you feel like, oh, things are supposed to be this way. I just interviewed a child of divorce whose parents got divorced when he was 25. So his
Mm-hmm.
whole life he's thought, oh, mom and dad are so in love with each other. Everything is perfect. Oh, it turns out they were only together for the sake of me. And now he's kind of dissecting things and going like, what happened? Whereas with me, like, yeah, it sucked at 8, but it became my normal after that. That, and
Mm-hmm.
by the time I was in middle school and high school, I was like, yeah, divorce, like I'm a pro at this. So it wasn't as traumatic as I feel like it would have been if I were older. But I mean, it's always going to come with its own tragedies at each age. But I do find that the older you get, the harder it is.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. Um, and when you're a little bit younger, at least at 8 year olds, you're still able to articulate your feelings. Like you're still able to like be able to tell me. Whereas when you're younger, you throw tantrums and you don't know. But then when you're a little bit older, adolescents going through puberty,
Mhm.
they they might be able to articulate their emotions, but they don't understand what emotions they're feeling because they're going through.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I always say, I mean, statistics show this that, between 8 and 11 is probably an easier time because of that. The other thing is that when you're 8 years old, your parents really want to protect you still because they look at you as a child. You're not quite a teenager. When you get
Right.
older, your parents start thinking, I don't need to protect you as much, which
Mm,
is why teenagers also struggle so much with divorce because they are not
mm,
given the time and attention to
yep.
deal with it because they think you're older, you'll get over it. Like you understand this.
Mm,
And so they're treated as if they're supposed to have this frontal lobe that says, I
ugh,
can process this. And so I guess my advice to parents out there would be that it doesn't matter what age your child is dealing with this, they're not old enough to process it the way that you think they should process it, and they should
yes.
get help. What's your
Yes.
thoughts on that? Like, if you're going through a divorce, what are your thoughts on helping or getting your kids help, therapy or a coach or something? What's your thoughts on that?
Girl, therapy's changed my life. So, like, it was definitely super weird to be a 10-year-old and talk about counseling or therapy, and my peers being like, well, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
And also, it did cause me to grow up faster than my peers. So I remember I'd like come home from school and complain to my mom about like just stupid petty things that elementary schoolers were doing. And she's like, well,
Mhm.
Grace, like you're growing up faster than them. Like I've always been called an old soul, and I'd bond with my teachers more than I would my peers. And I think that was because I had to grow up fast, not only because of the divorce, but then the counseling, which caused me to process the divorce. Um, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think counseling is huge. Like if I hadn't have done it then at age 10, it would have just continued to roll over and roll over, roll over. And then I'd start counseling maybe on my own as a young adult at age 20. And starting at age 20 is tough
Yeah.
because you've allowed then these neural pathways to be created for 10 years and these coping mechanisms that you've kind of built to survive. And now you're in therapy and you're trying to like dissect your childhood and you're like, shit, I'm doing college maybe, and or maybe I'm trying to find who I am right now. And it's already hard enough to be in your mid 20s, but without having like that backbone of knowing your childhood, I feel like it's tougher. So I have peers of mine who haven't done the counseling thing yet, and I'm like, you need to go to counseling.
Yeah.
And I love that I have that gift to bring into the world. Where I have almost this like tool belt that I bring into a lot of life. And yes, it surrounded the topic of divorce at the time, but now I'm using these tools in my job and connecting with my elementary school students and even like dating now. And so I think therapy is always a good thing. One thing I want to say too is therapy is like kind of like finding a good dentist. Like you may go to the dentist and be like, "Oh, that one cleaned my teeth too hard and I hated it and they were so rude. I'm going to go somewhere else." Great. Like it's not a one size fits all. So go to different therapists, research really well, see what they're certified in, see if they specialize in divorce, and make sure that you find the one that works for you and the one that works for your child. And don't give up. Like the first two, you might be like, wow, that was really crappy. Or your child might be like, that was a waste of time. But they will find their match. And once you find your match, like it is just one of the most miraculous things ever. I'm a huge proponent for counseling.
Yeah. And I get a lot of parents as well. So therapy becomes a very contentious topic because a lot of times therapists are used as weapons when, especially if you're going through a divorce for custody. And
Ooh,
so one of my biggest tips, I talk about it in my book and I've talked about it on this podcast is do not use your therapist as weapons. That's not their
yes.
job. They're
Yep.
not supposed to be impartial. So guess
Yep.
what? The child therapist is not supposed to be your friend. You're
Ooh.
not even really supposed to be part of therapy. I get parents that are like, oh, I sit in that therapy session every week. And I'm like, why? Like, this therapy is not for you. This is helping the children. And if the child's not going to feel safe and feel confident in being able to talk to this therapist if you're sitting in that room the entire time. So,
Mm.
so if your only purpose of taking your children to therapy is because you want a therapist to like,
Be on your side.
then you're doing it for the wrong purposes and you're just going to mess up your kids even more.
Mm.
So one of the things that I talk in my book is your kids will be okay. And I
Mm.
do some tips too. And I'm so excited to read your book. But I kind of want to talk about what your top tips are. Like you said, you do 10 tips or 10 that. So let's just go through a couple of the ones that you find
Sure.
are like the most important. What do you tell parents all the time? This is what you need to
Right.
know.
I mean, yeah, like a top thing that not only is talked about in my book a million times that I'm probably like a parrot in the book and people are gonna be like, oh my gosh, but also on the podcast with multiple guests, I'm always talking about how big of a deal it is when you talk crap about the other parent. I mean, I'm sure you've heard this a million times, but it wears and tears your relationship with your child and their relationship with the other parent. And you
Yep.
might think like, no, it's only destroying, their relationship with that other parent. No, it's actually hurting your relationship with them because now they're thinking to themselves, like if mom says to me, I don't know, dad dad lied about having a motorcycle. And then I go to dad's house and dad's like, no, I did have a motorcycle. And I'm like, wait, no, who do I trust? Because I'm hearing this here and I'm hearing that there. I know they both love me. They both show up for me in different ways. I don't want to have to pick sides. So who do I believe here? And both of them are going to look bad having opposite arguments and opposite opinions because I'm not going to know who to trust. So
Yeah.
it's then causes me to rebel or not trust you anymore, which then down the road can cause issues. As a teenager, you really want your kids to trust you because shit hits the fan in high school and you want your kids to be able to go to you when stuff gets really hard.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, talking shit about your ex is just not it. And I would just say, I get it. Like, I don't get it because I haven't been divorced. However, I can empathize with it. And so do that. You can totally do that, just not with your child. Do it with a friend, do it with a therapist, do it with your sister, your brother. Do not do it with your child. And on top of that, my mom once was talking to my aunt on the phone. And I think she forgot that like she's talking to her in the backyard and my room is like right above the backyard and my window was open. I could just hear everything that she was telling about my dad. And it's not like I was purposely eavesdropping. It's just what happened. And so I'd also say just be cautious where you're talking and know that your kids are very smart. They're perceptive and they can pick up on a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is like, don't think because you have a child that's turned 20 or 18 that they all of a sudden are immune and are able to be your sounding board.
Yes.
Because first of all, just like a 16-year-old, you shouldn't be putting your older child into that, conundrum of having to pick sides. Second of all, your older children are always going to say things to the younger children because they have a different relationship. So it's always going to get back to them. I can't stand it when I hear parents say, well, they're adults. It doesn't matter. And I'm like, nope, it matters.
Yes.
And so when we write it in our decree, like no talking bad to and like none of the children, I don't care how old they are.
Yeah.
That puts a lot of weight on those older children as well. Just don't do it.
Yeah. I would also say, Jill, I love that you talked about like the you almost said it without saying it, but like the emotional parentification that happens there when you're venting to your child. And my top reel that's popular right now on my Instagram is about parentification. And the reason why it got popular is because so many children of divorce are commenting their own stories saying like, oh my gosh, I hated when my mom or dad did this. Oh my gosh, this is the worst. Please, parents, don't do this. And what emotional parentification really is your children have to parent you in an emotional way. So your children are actually coaching you through your emotions, which is really backwards because you're the parent and you should be doing that. So I would just also say, watch out for that.
Yeah, like when you're going through a divorce and you're sad all the time and your kids are sitting there thinking, why are you sad all the time? And you say something like, oh, dad left me, or I'm poor, or we don't have any money, or this isn't how I expected my life to be. That puts so much pressure and angst on children.
Yes.
They are already going through so much with anxiety, with the worldly problems that they're having to deal with. I mean, just having to deal with the peer pressure and the social norms for them to have to then come home and deal with the fact that their parent who should be the parent isn't capable of being the parent is hard on children, and it's not fair to them.
Yeah.
So that's why I always say, adults, you need therapy too. You need something to get you through divorce. You need something to teach you how to emotionally handle this so you can start making bad decisions based off of emotions.
Yeah. And I would also say to parents, like, don't expect your kid to stop you in your tracks and be like, wait, mom, this is emotional parentification because they're kids. And I didn't realize what was happening to me at the time. I thought like me and my parents were supposed to be besties. And like, yeah, we're besties. We tell each other everything. Like, I talk about my dating problems, they talk about their dating problems, and we
Mhm.
compare our dating problems. And that is awesome and that is healthy. And then I learned, like, oh crap, that is enmeshment. And that is not healthy. And like, I should not, yes, I can vent to my parents about my dating problems, but they shouldn't be like, oh my gosh, same. Like last
Yeah.
week I went on a date with someone and blah, blah, blah. And I'm giving them advice on their dating life. Like, it's just, I thought that it gave me a lot of pride to help my parents and it made me feel important and special. But then what I didn't realize is like when I went to college, I felt people were like, are you nervous to go to college? You have to take care of yourself, blah, blah, blah. And I went to college and I felt so free because I was like, wait, I only have to take care of me? What? That's
Yeah.
amazing. Because I was taking care of literally
Yeah.
everyone else that I just didn't realize it until they weren't around. Like geographically, they were all in Colorado. And I was like, wait a second. Wow, like physical distance here is very helpful.
That's really good. And then going from parentification, but then we talk about alienation a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, we know the word alienation. That's when a parent is purposely doing things or saying things to the child to make them, pull away from the other person, the other parent.
Yeah.
But alienation is a real thing, and it's, it can be done in a lot of ways, manipulation, gaslighting. But this is a couple of things that I thought would be really good to put on this podcast. Let's talk about this. Like, so if you're going to visitation and your mom, you're going to your dad's for the weekend or whatever, and your mom's sitting there hugging you and saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss you so, so much. I really wanted to go see that brand new movie with you, but now we can't because you have to go to your dad's. That's alienation. That is you purposely saying things, whether it's because you're actually feeling those things or not. It's making the
Yep.
child feel bad or
Yep.
like they're missing out because they're going to their dad's. So that's my next tip. Don't do that.
Girl, I'm like making faces over here. If you guys are just listening to the podcast and you can't see my faces, like I'm making faces because it's like it's almost uncomfortable for me to hear that because I'm like, ugh, like it makes me crawl on my skin because I'm like, yes, that's literally what happened to me, and I can't. I've never really defined it as alienation before, and hearing you say that, I'm like, oh, damn it. Because you're right, I would carry that guilt into the weekend, and then, I'd go the extra mile and text the parent and be like, how is it going? I miss you so much. Like, it's not that fun here. And like try
Yeah.
and downplay it when I was having a blast, like
Yep.
maybe dad took me to Elitch Gardens and we were on roller coasters and mom's like, how fun was it? And I'm like, it wasn't that fun, but because I don't want to make her feel bad, well, then vice versa, I'll go to mom's and my dad would say, like, he would literally ask me straight up, he would be like, do you love me? And I'd be like, yes, dad, of course. And he's like, okay, okay. And I was like, what? Like, it's just sad that he always wanted that physical or verbal affirmation. Um, so I don't know. It's weird when I feel this with a lot of different children of divorce. Whenever we talk together, it's like this bond of, oh yeah, you were this weird mediator too, where you bounced around and going, you're okay, I love you. You're okay, I love you, and
Yeah.
jumping back and forth, making sure, does everyone know they're loved? Does everyone know they're okay? And meanwhile, like you can't address your own needs. So
Exactly. Well, and your parents, what they were doing is because they never dealt with the grief and got through their
yeah,
own grief cycle with
yeah.
divorce, that it's interesting that parents can like literally retract into like childish behaviors in
Oh
divorce.
yes.
But
Oh
it really
yes.
just comes down to, first of all, they are struggling with self-worth because there's a lot of guilt or shame that comes with the word divorce. And I
Yep.
just, I am on this movement of like changing that. Like, you shouldn't be ashamed of the
Good.
word divorce, because guess
Yes.
what happens in 50% of marriages? We all know somebody that got divorced.
Yep.
And so my whole thing is let's make it a platform for you to look at it and say, you know what? I am missing something, and I'm going to now use this divorce as the platform to become the best version of myself. And
Hmm.
guess what? when you become the best version of yourself, your self-worth goes up. Your ability to communicate is better. You're able to be a better friend, a better coworker, a better parent.
Mm, that's
And
good.
ma'am, instead of having this like shameful, oh, I got divorced, we're going to have a movement of a lot of people working on themselves to become better people. And that's
Yeah.
what we need.
I will
Um,
say one of the most beautiful things that my brother and I got to witness was my mom becoming who she was always meant to be. And so when we grew up seeing her with, with her and my dad together, we didn't really know who our mom was other than like the lady who always gave us hugs and made sure we were okay. But we didn't know what she was passionate about. We didn't know her opinions. And then post divorce, she just kind of like blossomed into this really powerful woman who now like isn't afraid to laugh really hard. And like she has this iconic, really weird thing where she'll laugh so hard, like she'll pee her pants. And so she's just like not embarrassed about stuff like that anymore. And
that's a
now she's
product
in,
of having babies, by
yeah,
the way, just let you know. It's so
not excited for that part. But yeah, and like now like she really dove deep into her passion for gardening and has these beautiful gardens and now has her own business she's trying to launch, and it's just really cool to see her now know who she is. And even Jack and I still kind of coach her, and we're like trying to draw boundaries there and be like, okay, she's her own person, but coach her on having opinions where we're like, okay, do we want to do this or this? And she's like, I don't care, because she's so used to saying I don't care that we're like, no, mom, what do you want to do? We care. What is your opinion right now? And so I don't know, that's just been a really cool part of it. And I love what you said. Yeah, like it doesn't need to be this shameful, like, oh, let me hide in this corner and no one can see me now. But rather like just own it. Like, yeah, it sucks. Yeah, you're gonna mourn it. Yes, like it's gonna change a lot for you. However, the things that come after it are usually more freeing and allow you to be more of who you are and who you're made to be, because divorce doesn't just like happen. Like it happens for a reason.
yeah, exactly. And it's all about what you want to put in it afterwards.
Yeah.
And I mean, as a child of divorce, I mean, my parents are still together, so I haven't experienced that. But my husband's parents divorced when he was 20.
Wow.
And I've experienced that because we got married when he was like 24, almost 25. So, within a
Wow.
few years after the divorce. And it is still just mind-boggling to me to the challenges we have with the immaturity of his parents. And we're talking about, a 67-year-old and a 65-year-old, like,
Yeah,
that
girl.
it should not be this, but it
No.
is. And so I can talk a little bit about the challenges that we've had with that dynamic.
Yeah.
And, it always just makes me laugh because I'm like, come on, guys, like we're better than this. But I love, anyways. And I've seen my husband was able to deal with the divorce a little bit better because he knew that they were bad for so long. And he was really
Mm.
grateful because his parents did exactly that. They kind of found, his mom especially found out what she's really passionate about. And
Oh,
she's been
good.
able to really flourish. So, but I did want to talk about this because my husband's dad married another woman and she has kids. And so we kind of became this like blended adult family, which I don't think
Yeah.
I mean, we're friends, but like, it's not like we see each other all the time.
Right.
So, but I wanted to talk about how you had like these half siblings
Sure.
with your dad and then with the divorce, like how that
Yeah.
happened and how that affected you.
Yeah. Well, to paint a picture of where we are now, a really beautiful piece is that this past Easter, so a couple weeks ago, I was at my half sister's house in Arizona. She's married and has kids, so I got to see my niece and nephew. Um, was there with my older half brother, my younger full-blooded brother, and my mom. So my mom was my older sibling's stepmom, but then post-divorce, she's technically not related to them anymore. But
Right.
they love her so much that they have just like brought her in, especially after my niece and nephew were born. They started calling her grandma, which was so sweet. And so she was invited to Easter, And it's weird because they don't owe her that, like she's not related to them, but it is this weird blended family. And I find that each year we're learning more and more about how to be in a relationship with each other in a healthy way. But for a while, like growing up, it was so hard because my siblings are so much older than me. My sister is 39 and I'm
Mhm.
24. And like just that age gap of relatability, like there wasn't much relatability. And she's a wonderful older sister. She's always loved on me super well growing up whenever we saw each other, and I felt like I could have fun with her. But at the same time, there was this disconnect where like Jack and I always felt closer because we actually grew up and did life together. Whereas like my older siblings, we would just see them for vacations or maybe a holiday. Like I didn't grow up having Christmas with my siblings,
Okay.
and my older siblings. But then it was interesting because like sometimes, especially when they were older and they had money, like they could fly then to Colorado for Christmas, and so that was really special. But we're all super super different, the four of us. So it's weird like sitting at a table together and trying not trying like I don't want to paint it in a false way, but we have fun with each other and we can talk about like surface level stuff.
Mhm.
But as far as like more than that, it can be kind of difficult because we all kind of live off of different moral compasses and core values, because we were all raised so differently. Like even my older half siblings, they too are full blooded together, but they're so different because my brother lived with us for 12 years and then she stayed with the mom because the mom just wanted her. And so it's just like, it's weird. We were all raised by different people, but the same people. But I think what's so beautiful is just what I said earlier of like, even amongst all of that drama, we can still come for something like Easter and
Yeah.
really enjoy each other and try to learn how to be like healthy adults that want to do life together.
I love that. And that's where blended families it doesn't need to look like anything. There doesn't need to be a preconceived way of blended families. And I love that you guys are making it work the way that you are making it work, and that you still get that, because that's the other thing is we don't talk a lot about divorce with half siblings or step siblings, but
Yeah.
sometimes, I mean, those divorces cut off that relationship completely. And all of a sudden, these siblings that you knew
No.
for years are cut out because, like you said, you're not related to them anymore. And that's really hard. And so my next tip would be, like, if you don't want to mess up your kids, don't just absolutely cut out those relationships just because you're deciding to divorce the person. That I think that that's really hard on families.
Yeah. Can I say one more thing about that?
Absolutely.
So I never had step siblings, still don't. But at the same time, my dad was with this woman for 9 years, broke up. Now they're trying to dabble in it again. Um, but she has three kids. So my younger brother and I grew up hanging out with these three kids. They were
Mm,
never married. They never, it was never officially my step siblings. However, we were friends with each other. We went to Disney World together at one point. Like, we're following each other on social media, and then they break up. And my dad said to my brother and I, "Hey, I need you guys to unfollow blah, 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 blah off of Instagram since blah, 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 and I broke up. Because, we're not going to see them again." And Jack and I were like, "Okay, Dad, like, yeah." And then we were very hurt because we're like, wait, we're supposed to break up with the kids as well? Like,
yeah.
we can't be friends with them anymore? Like, we've known them for 9 years and we can't. So it's super weird. And I would just say, like, a tip to parents in that situation is if your kids still want to be friends with your ex's kids, like, let them be friends. It's not
Yeah.
going to do much to you. Like, let them hang out, let them talk on Instagram or Snapchat. Like, let them, what's the big deal of them talking to them? I don't really think it's going to cause too much drama between you and your ex, and if it is, then maybe that's an issue between you guys. But like, I would say let your kids decide if they still want to be friends with them, because when he told us to basically friendship break up with them, I was like, this is making me look bad, because now they're
Yeah.
going to be like, why did she unfollow me, or why did she not want to talk anymore? And be like, my dad told me so.
Well, and that's again just an insecurity from the parent where they're not thinking it through. So there's people
Yep.
like you and I that can come here and say, don't do that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's hard on these kids. So again, just a great platform that you're setting.
Thank
So
you.
so when did you kind of see that co-parenting maybe got figured out with your parents? Did it get figured out, or was it more just
Yeah, my parents, one thing I will say that I've talked highly about them in the book is they're wonderful at being like very civil with each other.
right?
They would text communicate and sometimes call when Jack and I were little and didn't have phones yet to talk about, the arrangement of going back and forth. Um, I knew that there was like some drama in the beginning when they were dropping us off. There would be like fights, but they kind of protected Jack and I from it. Like it would be Jack and I would go into that one house and they'd like fight outside. So it's like whatever. But it was wonderful. Like even for our birthdays, they still wanted to do birthday dinners together. So like my dad would come over to our house and then Jack and I would pick out where we wanted to go to birthdays, and they would do that together and sit through it. My mom and dad were able to do that until Jack was 16. I think it was 16 when my mom was like, I can't do this anymore. I need to stop. And I was like, that's fair. Like you've done it for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So they were very, very civil. And my dad and mom both deeply, deeply care about each other still as friends. My mom, has some hard feelings towards him, but at the same time, I do know that she deeply respects him. And like, there was even a time where my mom had some trouble at home with this project she was doing. And my dad stayed when he dropped us off to like fix it for her. And so that was really sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And they just kind of do things like that where they help each other out as friends, but very much so like just, I don't know, kind of harsh boundaries. Like there was a point when I got my phone then and my mom's like, okay, not texting your dad anymore. Like you're texting him. I'm like, great. So,
I love that. What would be your final thought? Like if you can leave this show with one really important thing you want people to hear, what is it?
Yeah, I love that you gave me this space to say this, because I feel like this whole episode I've kind of just been like, don't do this, like bad parents. And I just want to say my parents are two of the best people on this earth. They have raised me well. I'm obsessed with them. They're so loving. They love in very unique ways. They're not the same.
Mm-hmm.
But to you parents out there listening, just be gracious to yourself. Like know that for most of you, this is your first rodeo. This is your first divorce, hopefully your only divorce. Right. And you've never gone through this before. You don't know what you're doing, and that's okay, and you're human. And the fact that you listen to this podcast all the way through just shows me that you are already in a way better headspace than most people are, because you're humbling yourself to accept advice from other people, and you're really searching for answers on how to do this thing well. And so with that, just give yourself a pat on the back and know that it's going to be okay, and your children are going to be okay. Like I love the title of this podcast, because this is really not going to kill you, and it's not going to kill your kids, and they're going to grow to be such wonderful individuals. And just, I don't know, just give yourself a lot of grace, parents. As much as you listen to yourself, you write down tips and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this. Also know like you're human and you're going to mess up. It's not a if you mess up, it's a when you mess up. Yeah. So, yeah.
I love that. All right, Grace, what's your book called, and where can people find you?
Love, yes. My book is called Dear Parents, Notes from a Child of Divorce. It has a bright yellow cover on it with markers. I'm about to post the cover soon.
I was just going to say, I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty great. But it's coming out in June. I'm not sure which date in June yet. I'm working on a few more things, but it's looking to be like June 10th is the predictable date. But to know exactly when it's coming out, you should find me on social media at Divorce Tips from Kids. And you can also listen to my podcast in the meantime, which has plenty of resources on it as well. And I also interview other children of divorce because I'm just one perspective out there. There's a lot of stories from other children who've been through this thing. And that podcast is called Divorce, What I Wish My Parents Knew. So yeah, I'm very excited. People can start pre-ordering towards the end of May, and I'll post about that on my social media as well. But yeah, they can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, the whole shebang.
That's amazing. Well, full circle, super proud of you. Like you go get it, girl.
Jill, that means a lot coming from you. I'm a big fan. I'm like trying not to fangirl over here, but yeah, thank you.
That was amazing. That was another episode of No One Dies from Divorce. Thank you so much, Grace. This was amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed, please subscribe, follow, and share. I'd love to hear your questions and feedback. You can contact me at community@jillcoyle.com. See you next time. I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. Any advice given on the podcast is general and shall not be construed as legal advice.